before we start the content for today, which we will talk more about JavaScript and also start talking about Git, before we talk about new things, so let's have a quick recap of what we learned on the Monday's lecture. So can everyone have a look at the code that I have here? And what do you think result 1 would be and what result 2 would be? And let's ignore this part for now. Yes. Just while everybody walking in, have a look at the code. And what do you think result 1 and 2 would be? Any thoughts for result 1? Yeah.
1 would be 7.
1 would be 7. Any other idea? Yeah.
52.
Sorry? 52 for result 1. Is that a string or a number? Okay, perhaps a string. Any other thoughts? Either 52 or 7. Okay, what about result 2? Before we show you what exactly result 1 is, let's have a look at result 2. What do you think result 2 would be? Yeah.
55.
55 for result 2. Yeah, any other thoughts? Result 2 can be, yeah, 10. Okay, cool. Let's have a look for both. Okay, I will run my code here. Can anyone remind me how I can run a JavaScript code? No? And then test.js. Yeah. So this is the answer. So it's 52 and 10. Did you have the right guess? Why? Why would be this case?
5's got quotation marks around it, so it's counted as a string.
Yeah.
Yeah, and not just a number.
Yeah. Okay, so just repeat for the online people because we got the feedback from online students on Monday that I need to repeat your question and stand closer to my laptop. So I won't be moving around today, so I'll be standing here still. So the reason is that the 5 for result 1, like in the first example, has the codes. So that's a string. Remember, like when we talk about strings in JavaScript, like you can connect 2 strings together using plus. So this is, so in this first example, we are actually connecting 2 strings together. So the result is 5 and 2, or 52. So that 52 is a string as well. This is for the first example. And for the second example, for the times symbol, like in JavaScript, it's not for combining 2 strings together, right? So it's a string for times. So JavaScript automatically treat this 5 as a number. So this is a calculation of 5 times 2. So that's why it be 10. So you can see that the type in JavaScript is dynamic, right? So it figure out the type for you. So this is the first quiz, maybe a quiz or a talk. So for the second one, so we have a mixed array here in this second example. And in this array, we have a number, 2 numbers of 1 and 2, 2 numbers in it, a string, 2, and we also have an object in it and an array. So how can we get like 1 in this mixed array or the string 2 in this mixed array? Can I do, for example, const a goes mixed array, and then which index should I use if I want to get the first one? So 1 here. 0. Yes, perfect. Okay. So how can I get access to 5 or 6 here? const b, sorry, mixed array, and so this is index 0, index 1, 2, 3, 4. Right, so 4. And then what if I want to get 5? So that would be 0. Yes, that's right. And we'll come back to the example. We'll come back to it. We'll talk more about objects. So last lecture, we didn't have enough time finishing talking about objects. So we'll continue the object lecture content, and then we'll come back to this example. Okay, cool. Any question about what we talked about so far before we move on more to objects? All good? Okay, cool. I think we kind of starting to rush in the last lecture from here. So we'll come back to here and give you some more explanations and details before we move on to Git. So object. So we mentioned in the last lecture how we can declare an object. And we also mentioned that normally we declare an object using const. This is because so user data, the variable here, does not contain actually the values here, but it's like the pointer in C. So it's actually user data here is pointing to the memory, like in JavaScript. And we can still change the value or the key value pairs in this object. Like we can add more key value pairs. We can also change the values in the object values. And we got questions after the lecture like, what is this object? So object is a predefined object in JavaScript. So it's not an object that we declared in our script, but it was pre-declared in JavaScript that you can use directly. And it has some functions that are quite useful and powerful. So for example, the first one, object.keys, it can return you with an array of the keys of user data. And another method is called object.entries, and it will return, like it will give you an array of the key value pairs. So this is useful when you want to loop through the key value pairs or key of values in an object. Right. So object is a predefined object in JavaScript. So we didn't declare that, but we can use that directly, and it provides you with some powerful and useful method or functions that you can get access to the values in the objects.
We don't need to include a library or anything.
No. It's very powerful, right? So you can use it directly. Yeah, so let's have a look at some more examples using arrays and objects together. So I'll use my VS Code again because I think slides doesn't show. So this is object loop 1. Object loop 1. Perfect. Here is it. So now we are declaring the user data as an array. So remember that in an array we can have multiple different data types, right? So here we are having objects in this array, and we are having 2 objects in this array. So this is the first one, and this is the second one. Right. So before we move on to the rights here, so let's have a look at this user data. So how can I get the values in this object? So what we can do is we can have const a user data and then 0. So what do you think if I console log this a variable? It will be like this. Right, so you can just see, imagine it like another normal number variable or string here. So you just print console out whatever you have at index 0. And here in this user data array, the value at index 0 is this object. So this is what will be console logged. Yeah, cool. Okay. So after that is clear, let's have a look at this. So in the previous example, we mentioned that object is a predefined object in JavaScript, and we can use its functions. And keys can give us the keys in an object, right? But user data here is not an object, or not an object. It's an array. So why can we use object.keys for user data? Yeah.
Everything's kind of an object.
Yeah, so this is why we mentioned in the last lecture, like almost everything in JavaScript is like an object. So an array, you can think of it like a special case of an object that it has a sequential index for the values in that array. So this is why we can also use object.keys for the user data. So what do you think this, like when we console log keys, the keys will be for user data? What are the keys for user data? Just guess, and we'll show you.
Name, agent,
Sorry?
name, agent, height.
Name, agent, height. Any other thoughts?
The index,
What are they?
the index of the
What is the index of this array?
0, 1.
0 and 1? Okay, so now we have two answers. Let's have a try. Which one do you vote? The first one or the second one? Second? First? Okay, cool. Let's have a look. I'm so excited. Object, it's good to see different answers in a class. It's 0 and 1. Right? So the keys of an array is the index, at the index. Okay. Now let's have a look at here. So after we look at the keys of this array, now let's have a look at the entries of this user data. So when we say like object.entries, remember that they are the key and value pairs. They are the entries, right? So what do you think when we can what we can get from like console log entries? It will be like brave guys. Like I will show you. What's that? The index and the values, the object value. Yeah. Okay. Let's have a look. Make it a bit smaller. It's too big here. I will comment here so that I can see clearly. So this is what we got. So they are arrays of key value pairs. So 0 and the object, 1 and the object. So these are the entries of this array. Yeah. The last one, remember what was the last one like we mentioned for object? Was values. So what do you think will be values for the user data? Yeah. Sally 18 and 186. So this will be what we can get for values. Okay, answer number 1. Do we have an answer number 2? A different answer. Okay, so the second answer is name Sally, age 18, height 186 cm. Right? So this is the second answer. So let's have a look. Yes, so the second one is correct. So why? Why do you think it's the case? Why these are the values of user data instead of Sally 18 and 186 cm? Yep.
We get the values of the outer object user data.
Yes.
Values are in an object.
Exactly. So user data is the object with keys 0, 1 and values name, age, height, like in the bracket, right? So these are actually the values for user data. So in this like user data object, there are two objects in it, so you can think of like this. So we are getting the values of user data instead of values of the first object in user data. Does that make sense? Yeah, question? Oh, okay, cool. Do we have questions? Okay, cool. So this is our first example. So now we can use what we have tried in the first example to look through the information or the values in this user data. So again, the user data is same here, still an array with two objects in it. It's the same user data. And what we want to do is we want to loop through this user data array and then console log the information in it. Okay, so remember, like when we can use array.length to get the length of that array. So similarly, we can use like user data.length to get the length of this user data. So what do you think is the length of this user data? So what's the value here? 2? Yes, that's right. Cool. So we have two iterations here, and then we console log user data I.name. What is this user data I when I is 0? What is user data I.name when I is 0? Is Sally. Yes, that's right. Any other? Sorry, I already said it's right. So yes, that's right. So user data 0 is the first one at index 0 for this user data array. And when we say .name, we are getting the value for property name here. So in the first iteration, the user data 0.name is Sally. And Sally's properties are name, user data 0.name is Sally, right, same. And then its age is 18 and height is 186 cm. And then we look for the second object in this user data array. And we console log them. So let's run it and have a look. Oh, sorry, I ran the wrong one. It should be look 2. So this is what is console log. So Sally's properties are name Sally, age 18, and height, and so on for the second object. So this is very powerful when we want to store some user data, like using arrays and objects. So we can look through the information and find information that we want. We have one more example here. So you can see in this example, the user data is a bit different. So it's no longer an array, it's declared as an object. And it has two objects in it. And for the first one, the key is Sally. And its values are an object. And within this object, there are two key value pairs. Right? Yeah, so now we are declaring user data as an object with two objects in it. And one, like each for one user. And the key for each object is the name, like Sally and Bob. And for each user, we store their properties in an object. Like what are they, like including age and height, and the values for age and height. So this is another way of storing data in object, like have object in an object. And again, we can loop through this user data to get information and console log the user information. So anyone remember the for in loop, like when we introduced array? Like we mentioned like for in loop and for off loop, right? So for in loop, the variables here will be the key of the object. Similarly, like in arrays, like for in loop, it will be index of an array. Right? So index in an array is actually very similar to key in an object. Make sense? Yeah. So we can, again, using for in loop to loop through the user data object. And then we can console log. So what is the key here in the first iteration? Like what is the first? So in the first iteration, what is key? Sally. Okay, so Sally's properties are, okay, so let's have a look at this inner loop. Key 2 in user data key. Yeah.
Shouldn't the key be 0 and 1 because you're using it in loops, it's the index of the thing, not of it?
Good question. So the question, to repeat for the online students, so the question is whether we should have key to be 0 or 1 rather than Sally and Bob. Do we have an answer from the audience? Like why is Sally and Bob rather than 0 and 1? Yeah.
Because it's 4 in, right?
Causes
4 in loop.
because it's 4 in loop.
Yeah, because if it's 4 off loop, it would be like 0, 1, 2, 3, I guess.
Any other answer? It's an object containing object rather than an array containing objects. Yes, that's the correct answer. So when we have an array, the index are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Right? But here user data is not an array. It's an object. And when we loop through the object, the keys are here.
Oh, so Sally and Bob are the indexes.
So in object, we do not have index because it's not sequential. But we have keys, or we can say properties. And it's very similar to index in an array. The difference is object is an associative collection of data, meaning that there's no sequential order. So there's no 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but there are the properties or keys.
Then you can still forward.
Yes. Yes, that's right.
There's an order in the sense that you can still do a forward transfer.
Yes. Just to repeat for the online students. So the question is why we can still loop through user data when there's no index as 0 or 1, but we can still loop through the keys in this object. Right. Yeah, question.
So because there's no like order,
Yeah.
when you do a for loop, does
Mhm.
that mean will it always come up in the same like order that you typed it, or is there like how does it order?
Yeah.
Choose the order of how it goes through it.
Yeah, that's a very good question. Actually, normally it loops through the order that you type it in the object. But I think in one case or two cases, like I did remember, like JavaScript returned me with the different order rather than what I have here. I don't know why, to be honest, but it's associative, but shouldn't matter. Yeah. Yeah, question.
So for user data, since it only contains objects, we take it as an object because like isn't it possible for an array to consist of objects as well?
Sorry, can you repeat the question?
So you said an array can consist of different data types, right?
Yeah, so in an array we can have different data type in it, right?
Over here is just objects. So is that why we don't use index? Like if we had some numbers instead.
So the question is, can we use numbers here? Is that right?
No, if you add like so Sally and then comma and then you add a number.
Sally,
A different
where?
Just add a different data type instead of an object.
Add another data type rather than object. So can we have just Sally here? Is that your question?
Yeah. So wouldn't this be an array then? Where it's like different data types?
Will this be an array or another data type?
Yeah, won't this be an array?
Uh-huh. Will this be an array?
Yeah.
Why do you think there will be an array? So in this user data, it's an object with multiple variables or values in it. And they can also be of different data types.
So how do you convert this into an array so that you can access these things?
Anyone can, yeah.
Just the way that you declare what you use about it, because they're using like curly brackets, like
Yeah.
as an object,
Yeah.
if you want an array, you use the other type.
Yes, that's right. So the question is, when we want to declare an object, we use this kind of bracket. If we declare an array, we use this when we declare an array. Yeah. Not sure if I answer your question, but if you have any further question, feel free to come to me after the lecture. Cool. Okay, so now let's have a look at this line. What can be console logged here? So what is key 2 in user data key? One key is Sally. The key 2s are
Is it
age and height. Any other thoughts? All agree? Yes. The key 2 will be age and height. And then when we console log key 2, so for example, when key 2 is age, then what is this one? Like user data key and key 2. So what is user data Sally age? Is 18. That's right. Do we have any question here? What's your question? If you have a question here. No question? All good? I had a question, like when I first look at this way of referencing data. So remembering that we said that user data is not an array, it's an object. Right? Remembering how we access the value in an object, we used user data dot, for example, Sally, right? And then we can also dot age. So this is what we normally do when we want to get 18 here. But why we are using bracket instead of dot? Yeah.
Because key and key 2 are string.
Key and key 2 are strings. Very close. Yeah.
We can't explicitly use the strings as a reference to the objects in this way, because this requires a variable.
Yes, that's correct. So when it's not like specific value of the keys here, but here key and key 2, they are variables, meaning that they can change in each iteration, in the loop iterations, right? So in this case, we need to use bracket. But if we know what is it, like if we know it's Sally, it's age in this user data object, we can use dot. But if it's a variable, we can't use dot. Otherwise, it will treat key and key 2 as like the keys in this object. But it's not like key and key 2, they are not actually keys in user data, right? So they are variables. Make sense? So if we have, for example, user data dot key 2, there will be an error message saying that they cannot find key in user data. They cannot find key 2 in user data. Yeah, make sense? Okay, cool.
Could you remind me what the dollar sign and then the curly brackets mean?
What the dollar sign and curly bracket mean? So this is string literals in JavaScript. So this is how we can combine strings and variables in a string. So here was the first example that I showed when we introduced the string literals, right? Remember, like, hello, my name is Petra and I'm 7. So this was the first example that we introduced. Yeah. Any question for this example? Yeah.
So in the second one, why don't we use a dot like after the first square bracket?
So why don't we have something like this?
Or dot like height over there?
So why don't we remove key 2 into age?
Yeah, since that's fixed.
We can, if we know what exactly are in user data. And the keys are the same for the different objects in this user data object. We can do this, so no problem. Yeah. Okay. I think that's all for the JavaScript slides. One more here, like combining everything together. So this example, so we are like having different students' data stored in our script. So we have student 1 with name and score, student 2 with name and score, and student 3. And then we can use an array to put this object together. And then what we want is we want to console log the students who get an HD. So the first approach is we first get the length of the number student, like the length of the students array, so that would be 3. So we have 3 students to loop through. And then for each student, we check whether they got a score, like mark above 85. And if they are, we console log their name and saying that they get an HD. And we can do for off loop for the example as well. Right. Yeah, I think it's quite straightforward. And then we can still do like, if the student score is above 85, and then we console log student name and get an HD. Make sense? Yeah. So there's nothing new here, just we combining what we have learned in the JavaScript lecture in this example. Okay. Yeah, question.
On line 11, why do you need to? Oh, sorry, on line 12, why do you need to do student equals student plus I? Can you not just do student I dot score and then, like, why do you need to do the proof?
Very good question. What about we just have a try? So your question is, can we do something like this?
And then it'll also be for the proof that comes along.
Yes. So we need to console log this rather than student, right? I need to comment this line as well because we are not using student. And also commenting the approach to avoid confusion. And this file is called combining.
So it does.
It works.
It works? Okay.
Yeah, it works. So it's just how abstract you want your code to be. So we will actually talk about this in our future lectures. Like abstracting your code can sometimes be good, but not always.
Okay.
Yep. All good so far? Yeah. Okay, cool. So I think that's all for JavaScript. So again, you may feel like you learned a lot in a very short time, but you will get the opportunity to practice again and again and again. And also lab 1 doesn't count any marks, so you can still practice in week 2, so next week. So you consolidate what you have learned.